defense is now getting its turn in the trial, accused of murdering his ex-girlfriend.
Well, staff throughout this trial, Hughley has sat expressionless, almost stoic at the defense table. All of that changed today. As this police interview was airing, Hughley began crying.
She's dead. Oh my God.
Betrayal and passion collide in this chilling tale of a criminal who brutally kills his own beloved. What drove him to commit such a heinous act? Or was it unintentional? In the early hours of May 3rd, 2010, when the police showed up at 22-year-old Yardley Love's college flat, they discovered a disturbing scene. When one of Love's roommates, Caitlyn, came back to talk to her, she was horrified to see what was in the room. Love's bedroom door had a sizable hole punched in it, and her lifeless body was laying face down in a pool of blood in the middle of the room. Caitlyn called the police right away, and they were only minutes away from the horrific scene when they arrived. They understood after seeing the body that there was something much more sinister going on than a case of drug or alcohol recovery. Love had visible physical injuries, including a black eye, bruising along her right cheek, and large bleeding gashes along her legs, which were all quickly discovered. Despite efforts to revive her, Yardley Love was declared dead and was later suspected of having been murdered after being found unconscious for 30 minutes. Well, we must first investigate Yardley Love's life and comprehend the context of this case. George Hughley, her devoted boyfriend, had a history of extreme violence. In spite of this, people perceived the couple as charming and regular. But due to George's alcoholism and irrational outbursts, Yardley ultimately made the decision to end their relationship in April 2010, nearly 2.5 years into their relationship. George was arrested and questioned just over a day after Yardley was killed and charged with her homicide. Police cameras captured the entire interrogation, which tells the tragic story of a man who is blissfully unaware of the nightmare he's responsible for. The detective notifies George that he's being detained at the start of the interview, but does not elaborate on the crime being looked into. George answers questions by describing where he was on May 2nd, the night of Yardley's murder.
I went to dinner with my dad and my two buddies.
Where was that? We're joking.
I went to CNO.
Okay.
And then went home, went to the bar for like a little while. And
Right. What time did you go out to eat?
that was probably 7:30 with dinner.
Okay.
And then went home. I drank a few beers. Went I went to the bar for a little while. I went to
Which bar?
Boyle Heights.
Wow, okay.
Then I went over to talk to Yardley.
Who's Yardley?
Yardley is my former girlfriend.
Okay.
When I went over to talk to Yardley,
George confessed to visiting Yardley in her flat after a night of drinking during the interrogation. By casually asking who she was, the detective took advantage of the situation to emphasize that the interview was not about Yardley. This initially unimportant query would later turn out to be crucial in the interrogation.
I was like, Yardley, and she was already totally freaked out because of what she did this past a few days ago, and we haven't talked since. And I was just gonna go talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
She was already freaking out.
When George is questioned, he mentions that Yardley appeared frightened when he arrived at her apartment. He tries to explain this by saying they hadn't spoken since the breakup, and she wasn't expecting to see him. However, this explanation is false. It's more likely that Yardley was shocked and scared because a drunken George appeared in her apartment and kicked down her bedroom door. Despite this, the detective remains impartial and sympathetic in her statements, reinforcing the notion that she is simply there to gather information and does not hold any bias against George himself.
And I never hit her, never struck her, and nothing happened.
All right, so you go over there, knock on the door.
Her front door was open,
Mm-hmm.
her room door was closed. I knocked, Yardley, she heard me open the door and went in.
Went in where?
To her room.
All right, straight to her bedroom?
Straight to her bedroom, yeah.
How'd you get through the door?
Her door or the front door?
Her door.
Actually, it might have been locked.
Mm-hmm. It was.
Yeah. Actually, yeah.
Just be honest with me.
Yeah, it was locked, yeah. Because I think I put a hole.
Yeah. You punched a hole through the door?
Pretty sure, actually, now. Yeah, I used to have that, yeah.
Okay.
I was like, listen, what you pulled last week was outrageous. Like, I just want to talk to you.
Why'd you punch the door then?
Because I want to talk to her.
George reveals more information as he speaks, going beyond simply being attacked. He acknowledges that he believed Yardley had betrayed him while he was trying to mend their relationship. He expresses his frustration and other strong feelings that, when amplified by alcohol abuse, may develop into resentment and anger.
And then we like wrestled on the ground the same way. Her nose started bleeding. And then she ended. I think she was back in bed, and I left. I was like, "This is not going anywhere."
How'd she get back in bed?
We were like wrestling, and we stood up, and I tossed her. I pushed her onto the bed. I was like, "Go to bed. Like, I'll talk to you later." I'm like, I didn't like throw her, but like we were like standing up at this point after we were wrestling on the ground. She had like a bloody nose. And I was like, go to bed.
Okay. And you kind of tossed her on the bed and you left?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you go back and check on her at any point?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you touch her neck area at all? Did you choke her at one point?
I may have grabbed her a little bit by the neck when we were like, but I never like strangled her.
Okay.
One clear indication of George's growing candor during the questioning is his bloody nose. He didn't know why it happened at first, guessing that Yardley might have done it by banging her head against the wall. But as the interrogation went on, he acknowledged to pushing her onto the bed, and even possibly choking her in a struggle on the floor. The pressure of the interrogation was forcing him to tell the truth, even though he was still unaware that he was to blame for her demise. By questioning George in an accusatory manner and forcing him into a tight spot, the detective puts more pressure on George. His emotions are heightened, and he is made anxious intentionally so that he will divulge information that he otherwise would not have. The next 10 minutes of the interview consist of standard inquiries about Yardley's murderous night, such as his whereabouts, level of drinking, and bedtime. But after a while of leaving George alone, the detective comes back and puts more pressure on him, heightening the tenseness in the space.
Is there another reason why you two broke up? Any arguments? Any past physical violence?
Okay,
because keep in mind, before we've talked to you, we've talked to other people too.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I mean, that night that she found the text messages on my phone, I don't know. That night I was more drunk than I've probably ever been.
Right.
And she did the same thing, like yelling at me, like hitting me while I'm drunk, and I actually laid on her and like held her, like detained her kind of, and she ended up like leaving, but that happened that night.
He had a warrant out for him as an informal confession, and this is exactly what happened with George. He wasn't accused of assault, but he was being detained for murder. As soon as George realizes his error, he starts to panic, and the detective starts asking more and more questions. The questions asked up to this point were rapid-fire and accusatory in nature, focusing solely on assault. There was no mention of loss of consciousness or death. However, the tone and direction of the interrogation suddenly shifted, with a clear implication for George regarding the death of Yardley.
When you left out there, were you kind of like, she got what she deserved?
It wasn't about that for me. It was about going to talk to her.
Well, I have to tell you something.
Well, I think I know why you took the computer.
Why do you think?
Is that right?
Go ahead.
No?
There
She's dead. You killed her, George.
She's dead?
I think you knew that already.
No, I did not. How the fuck is she dead?
Because you killed her, George.
How the fuck is she dead?
Because you killed her.
George is faced with the shocking realization that his 22-year-old girlfriend, with whom he had been dating for more than 2.5 years, died as a result of his actions. Although it is unclear whether the murder of Yardley Love was intentional or not, it was found that the crime was not planned out in advance. But on August 30th, 2012, George Hewley received a 23-year prison term for killing his ex-girlfriend, Yardley Love, in the 2nd degree. So, do you think justice has been served? What sentence do you think he should get? Let us know in the comments below.